for the corner office. It's the ideas that inspire redefining order and elevating the tabletop. To the nines, for the leaders of today and the visionaries of tomorrow.
Light, camera, and action. Kick back, relax, grab your favorite snack because News 9 is here with your weekend dose of entertainment. It's time to take a deeper dive into the buzzworthy happenings of the entertainment world. From celebrity gossips to exclusive conversations, from nostalgic moments to News 9's pick of the week, don't worry, we've got you covered here. And I hope you've grabbed your popcorn by now because News 9's page 3 is here to serve you everything that we call entertainment. So do stay tuned every Saturday and Sunday, 2:30 p.m.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9, English news as it should be.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. I'm Shweta Kothari. On the show today, we will discuss Starlink's entry into India after it signed a deal with Airtel and just this morning with Reliance Jio. Also on the show, US recession and what does it really mean for the world over? Coming up very shortly on Morning Brief at 9. And you're watching Morning Brief at 9. I'm Shweta Kothari. Let's take a quick look at top headlines we are tracking this morning. After Airtel, now Jio also signs a deal to get Starlink into India. What does this mean for you, the consumers? We decode on the show. Morgan Stanley remains bullish on India, expects SENSEX to hit 1,05,000 mark by December of 2025 in a bull case scenario. In case of a bear market, SENSEX could further slip 6% to 70,000 levels by December of 25. And Morgan Stanley has now downgraded INFOSYS to equal weight from overweight after 4 years in overweight category, citing concerns over slowing growth and stretched valuations. And after the Dharavi slum redevelopment project, Adani Group to redevelop Motilal Nagar in Mumbai emerges as the highest bidder for the 36,000 crore rupees redevelopment in one of Mumbai's biggest housing redevelopment projects, covering over 143 acres land. The Reserve Bank of India to issue bank notes of 100 rupees and 200 rupees denominations bearing the signature of newly appointed Governor Sanjay Malhotra soon. All bank notes of 100, 200 issued by Reserve Bank of India in the past will continue to be legal tender. Wall Street sell-off spiraled on Tuesday following President Donald Trump's latest escalation in trade war, briefly pulling the US stock market 10% below a record set up just a few weeks ago. Over 4 trillion rupees wiped out from the markets. US President Donald Trump buys a brand new Tesla as a show of support to Elon Musk's electric vehicle company, which is now facing a blowback because Tesla CEO's work to advance presidential political agenda is picking pace. Stock rallies 4% yesterday. The United States has now agreed to resume military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine after Kyiv expressed readiness to accept a 30-day ceasefire in its conflict with Russia. And Donald Trump pauses a 50% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminium, will instead go ahead with 25% steel just after a midnight, capping off yet another chaotic day of trade threats against neighbors. And our top story at this hour, while Tesla's drive into India gets firmed up, Elon Musk's Starlink is already gazing at the Indian skies, and it seems it has two partners vying for it. One, of course, is Bharti Airtel, now with Reliance Jio as well. That's right, hours after Bharti Airtel signed an agreement with Elon Musk-led SpaceX to offer high-speed internet services under Starlink to its customers in India, market leader Reliance Jio is now following suit. Remember, Airtel is also the single largest shareholder with 21.2% share in Starlink's rival firm Eutelsat OneWeb. Now, meanwhile, OneWeb has received permission to start operations in India and is waiting for spectrum allocation to roll out services, but Starlink will still await regulatory approvals to sell its services in India. So while it has already signed a deal with Airtel and Jio, a regulatory approval is still awaited. Details of the Reliance Jio Starlink deal are also awaited. Under the Bharti Airtel Pact, Airtel and SpaceX will explore offering Starlink equipment at Airtel's retail stores and Starlink services via Airtel to business customers. Opportunities to connect communities, schools and health centers, among many others, in even the most distant rural parts of India is also on the offering. A statement from Airtel said that Airtel and SpaceX will also explore how Starlink could help expand and enhance Airtel network as well as SpaceX ability to utilize and benefit from Airtel's ground network infrastructure and other capabilities in India. Remember, just last year, Sunil Bharti Mittal at Indian Mobile Congress had joined his rival Mukesh Ambani-led Jio to make a strong case for satellite companies paying license fee as well as buying airwaves for their telecom services, just like legacy companies do, in a bid to create a level playing field. He had said that satellite companies who have ambitions to come into urban areas serving retail customers just need to pay the telecom license like everyone else, and they are bound to do the same as per conditions as telecom operators in India. Now, SpaceX and other SATCOM players have opposed the auction route in the past for spectrum allocation. Musk had first termed the demand made by Jio for shunning sector regulatory TRAI's consultation paper on satellite broadband being allocated and not auctioned as unprecedented. Now, after Mittal's speech in the presence of Prime Minister Modi at the India Mobile Congress, Musk asked if it was too much trouble to allow Starlink to provide internet services in India. Now, in the same month, Airtel also asked telecom regulator TRAI to price the satellite spectrum in a manner that addresses the concerns on a level playing field between terrestrial operators and satellite operators offering services directly to customers in urban areas as well as retail customers. Now, Starlink has been pitching for allocation of spectrum at less than 1% of the adjusted gross revenue, the AGR, which is revenue earned from the sale of telecom services. Telecom operators are charging 8% of their AGR as license fee every year, and spectrum charges are separate every year, remember, besides paying, of course, upfront amount for getting the rights of their usage. So the two big questions that now emerge is, how does Starlink coming to India impact you, the consumer? And will you be able to likely spoil between the two choices of two telecom players in the country who will now be offering Starlink satellite and using perhaps their own platform to do so? Joining me to help figure out what this really means for you, the people, as well as for the telecom sector in India is Kumardeep Banerjee. Kumardeep, thank you very much for taking time out. I want you to first simplify this for us. How can Airtel and Jio both sign a similar pact to get Starlink to India? What's really happening here? We heard Airtel and by the way of a press release yesterday detailing how they have tied up with Starlink. This morning we're also hearing that Reliance Jio is also tying up with Starlink. How will it all figure out in the larger scheme of things?
Okay, I'll give you. There are. Apparently it seems that there are conflicting interests at play, and I will come to it. I will park the second point for a bit. But essentially, what we understand is that these are, in sort of franchise deals where both Airtel and Reliance Jio would be able to, sell Starlink equipment from their stores. What I read also was that Jio has also mentioned that they would also help in installation of Starlink equipment. So so if we are given to understand that, then it means that it's basically a hardware kind of a deal where the services would be provided by Starlink itself. Having said that, there is another let's say anomaly here, given the fact that both Reliance Jio and Airtel have got permissions to start their own satellite communication services in the country. And so far, both of them have had conflicting views with what Starlink or even Jeff Bezos's Kuiper network intends to do, wherein both, as you rightly pointed out a short while back, that both Airtel and Jio are in favor of having spectrum auctions and a level playing field with terrestrial networks is what they have been saying, except for the last or beginning of this month, Mr. Sunil Bharti Mittal during the Mobile World Congress has indicated that this is not the time to fight with the satellite operators, and both terrestrial and satellite operators should be collaborating, perhaps an indication of where the future was leading to. But having said that, both of them have within their web of services or within their entire spectrum of services would also have their own satellite communications, which would be directly competing with Starlink's. So it would be an interesting, interesting space to watch out for, given that three large players are now sort of in a mesh with each other and trying to offer services. And what I feel would be the cost of services is what will determine who will get a headway. There would be regulatory challenges. There are regulatory challenges, and it is
services. I want to talk about cost of services in just a bit, I think, because that would be important and interesting to all the consumers who are hoping to perhaps use Starlink satellite internet going forward. But let me first begin by understanding the regulatory challenges as you were coming to. All of this is, of course, subject to TRAI approval and telecom regulators' approval going forward. What's going to hold back TRAI? What's really holding back TRAI from giving its nod? Because we've been hearing about Starlink's entry into India has been met with a lot of regulatory hurdles in the past. One, of course, is the fact that established players in India were against the differing fee, the AGR issue that continued to be one of the bone of contentions, and that perhaps was something that TRAI and Telecoms Authority was mulling over. But what are the regulatory challenges as it stands today, or are there no regulatory challenges and perhaps this is going to happen very, very shortly?
There are a bunch of regulatory challenges. First of all, Shweta, you are well aware of it that telecom sector is one of the most heavily regulated sectors in this country, and it has always been. And it is not just spectrum allocation, administrative spectrum allocation, sectoral regulator try looking into it. Also, you might be aware that the telecom tariffs in this country are under forbearance. So TRAI doesn't have a direct say. It's more or less competition which decides. But then TRAI sort of gives a direction that this is how the charges ought to be. That is one part of the story. The second piece, and I think that is crucial, is for Starlink to obtain the security clearances from the Ministry of Home Affairs. I'm given to understand that Ministry of Home Affairs is currently vetting Starlink's paper. Then there is a DPIIT regulation, Press Note 3, which came out a couple of years back during COVID times, which requires any investor, specifically in sensitive sectors like telecommunications or communication services, to give complete details of their board, the constitution of the board, nationality. Basically, what DPIIT wants to understand, DPIIT is the Department for Promotion of Industrial Internal Investment and Trade, which is a part of the Commerce Ministry. So DPIIT is will try to take a look at what is the ownership, who are the board of directors, in order to ensure that none of this money or none of the investors have close links with any country with which India shares land borders. In this case, it would be China, which they are worried about. That's one part. That's
Okay.
one other regulatory framework that one needs to look at. Third, all these equipment, because all the telecom equipment that is put in any network has to go through a mandatory security and regulatory compliance testing done in Indian labs. The scheme is called MTCTE and it is administered by TEC. Also, there is something called NCCS, which basically looks into security compliances. And I did look at one of the circulars which had come out a few days back, which also mandates that any satellite communication equipment also has to go through the MTCT process. That process by itself is a 9 months to 1 year process, and that would be another regulatory hurdle. Then there are data localization requirements because it is all sensitive data. Then there are requirements that you cannot offer services in border areas, the width of which has to be decided by Government of India. So there are a bunch of these regulatory framework or quagmires one has to negotiate before.
All right, and let's assume that these regulatory challenges and hurdles will be successfully crossed over by both Reliance as well as Airtel. Can we now assume price wars will only intensify? The game is now shifting to pure price wars, and how does it really pan out eventually? Does the customer stand to gain more, or with Elon Musk entering and tying up with both Jio and Airtel, what does it really mean for the customers in India? What does it mean as far as competitive pricing is concerned? Is it going to be cheaper, more expensive going forward, given that Reliance Jio will of course want to have one-upmanship over Airtel when it comes to satellite internet?
First one, as far as I understand, and I'm looking at the situation currently, it looks like that this is not a retail offering. They are trying to offer it at enterprise level, and also trying to connect the remote areas, specifically in the eastern part of the country, in the sub-Himalayan regions, where terrestrial network connectivity is extremely poor. Now, Government of India, because it is one of the largest, and Government of India pushes Digital India as one of its key missions. So if Government of India subsidizes some of these services for providing remote access in or even in, let's say, in Naxalite areas in Chhattisgarh and some other parts of the country, then it could be a success. I'll just give you a statistic. The last time Starlink was offering services in the country when they had started in 21, the approximate cost of the equipment, just the hardware equipment, was around between 25 to 35,000. Which is on the higher side, if you ask me, and the cost of service per month was between 4,000 to 7,000 rupees. Now that's a little bit on the higher side, and I don't think that any retail customer in this country is willing to pay that much money for a high-speed internet. But it would be the enterprises, schools, colleges, hospitals, as was mentioned in the press releases that we have seen coming out from Airtel as well as from Jio, and the statements made by SpaceX itself. So it will be an interesting space to watch out for, and how do they in the back end also tie up with the government. Perhaps I wouldn't, I mean, even the USOF fund, the Universal Services Fund, may be diverted for providing access or subsidizing some of these satellite services. After all, USOF is meant to be used for those purposes, and Airtel, Jio have already paid are already paying that kind of money to the government as a percentage every year to the USO. They contribute to the USO fund. So let's see, it would be an interesting space, but as of now, I don't see that it would be a retail offering.
Before I let you go, thank you for clarifying. It's not going to be a retail offering, so perhaps customers like you and me will not stand to gain just as yet. But before I let you go, I have to ask you, for the longest time now, we've seen domestic players really pushing back when it comes to satellite internet, especially one offered by Starlink, and how they will lose out the competitive edge. Now, with Elon Musk tying up with both Airtel as well as Jio, I believe he's the one who stands to gain in the entire process.
Well, let's say that there is geopolitics also at play, and and everybody knows that Mr. Musk is currently the if not the most powerful, but the second most powerful planet, human being on this entire planet. So let's wait for how things pan out.
All right. Thank you very much for all those details, Kumardeep. Thank you for joining us on the show this morning. And moving on now, global markets, including India, have been facing continuous downturns amid geopolitical instability and trade tensions lately. But analysts at Morgan Stanley see a bright future for Indian equities. Their latest projections suggest SENSEX could soar up to 105,000 points by December of 2025 in a bullish scenario, marking a 41% jump from the current levels. Now, the brokerage expects the Sensex to touch 93,000, a 25% rise. However, in a bear case scenario, the index could slide 6% to end and settle at 70,000 by the end of December of 2025. Now, Morgan Stanley highlighted that market valuations are now the most attractive since COVID, making this a stock pickers market. They also predicted that India will emerge as the world's most sought after consumer market, witnessing a major energy transition, and sees a credit to GDP growth alongside rising manufacturing sector. And shifting focus now, US listed shares of INFOSYS fell for the second consecutive day on Tuesday after Morgan Stanley downgraded the IT firm to equal weight from overweight. The brokerage, which had maintained an overweight rating on INFOSYS for at least 4 years, cited concerns over slowing growth and stretched valuations. It also reduced its target price to 1,740 rupees from 2,150, indicating a 19% downside. INFOSYS's US listed shares reacted negatively in pre-market trading, dropping nearly 2.1% in the previous session. Morgan Stanley says that there are downside risks emerging for INFOSYS from both the revenue growth point of view as well as the valuation multiples. Now, INFOSYS share also dropped 2.3% in Tuesday's trade in India, closing at 1,661 levels on the NSE, bringing their year-to-date decline to 11.6% in 2025. And shifting focus now, the government has introduced the Immigration and Foreigners Bill 2025 in Lok Sabha, aiming to modernize immigration laws and strengthen national security and impose stricter penalties for violations. The bill proposes to replace 4-decade-old colonial era rules, including Foreigners Act of 1946 and the Passport Entry into India Act of 1920, bringing all immigration rules under one single comprehensive framework. Some of the key features include national security measures, where foreigners deemed threat to India's sovereignty can be denied entry or stay, and immigration officers will have to arrest or have the power to arrest violators without any warrant. The bill also mandates that all foreigners must register upon arrival in India, and institutions like hospital, educational establishments must report any foreign national under their care. Now, secondly, there are also strict entry and stay regulations where every foreigner must have a valid passport and a visa to enter or leave India. Airlines and transport operators carrying individuals without valid documents will be held responsible and could face hefty fines and seizure of vehicles if they fail to comply. And thirdly, heavy penalty for violations arriving without valid documents could lead to 5 years in prison and up to 5 lakh rupees in fine, and using forged documents carries a jail term of 2 years to 7 years with fines up to 10 lakh rupees. Overstaying a visa and violation of its conditions can result in 3 years of imprisonment and a 3 lakh rupees in fine. Foreigners with dual citizenship will be recognized as citizens of the country whose passport they use to enter India. Remember, introducing the bill, Home Minister Nityanand Rai emphasized that the move is not to discourage visitors but to ensure strict compliance with immigration law. That is of course, as far as Nityanand Rai, Minister of State for Home Affairs, and his speech in the Parliament is concerned. He further said that India welcomes visitors, but they must follow the rule of the land. And with that, it's time for a short break. Coming up very shortly is US heading into recession, and what does it mean for economies world over, with Banik Chitran Moitro very briefly from now. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
You work too hard. Work smart like me.
Why? Won a lottery, is it?
You can say so. I'm investing in a great scheme in the share market. High returns guaranteed.
Your high returns aren't Karan Arjun for them to definitely come to you.
Meaning?
Dad, there's risk involved in the share market. Nobody can promise guaranteed high returns. It's illegal to do so.
Really?
Yeah.
Hello everyone. We have the biggest announcement of 2025, especially for cricket fans. We're bringing a golden chance to win a free trip to the UK with your favorite legends. Suresh Raina, Shikhar Dhawan, Shahid Afridi, Chris Gale, Brett Lee. These legends won't just meet you, but you'll stay in the same hotel, travel in the same bus, and witness their practice sessions live and be a part of the post-match team celebrations and gala dinner. 12 lucky winners will get the golden chance to travel with their favorite teams and players, with all expenses covered by us. The entry forms will be available starting 15th February. Keep checking updates on our website wclcricket.com and our Instagram. Get ready to turn your dream experience into reality.
मैं और आप एक जैसे ही तो हैं। एक बार मंजिल दिख जाए
One shot of a century.
तो उसे पाने के लिए हम अपने कदमों को नहीं रोकते।
That looks out.
पर कभी-कभी मेहनत और मंजिल के बीच रह जाता है एक फासला। खैर, मुझे उस फासले को मिटाने के लिए थोड़ी और मेहनत लगेगी, पर शुक्र है आपके पास है टाटा कैपिटल, जो मिटाए फासले आपकी मेहनत और मंजिल के बीच। टाटा कैपिटल, मिटाए फासले।
What does it take to be the greatest in the world? There is one thing which truly sets you apart. Your inner strength. Sojiriv TMT Reebok, true inner strength.
I know that you and I, we are dreamers. Our heads up in the sky, we're flying free. Whatever it takes, we're gonna own this.
For an India that's chasing its dreams, this is the drive of your dreams. Introducing the all-new Skoda Kailak. Own your dream.
Skoda.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. I'm Shweta Kothari. Let's take a quick look at how markets are opening this morning. In fact, markets have a flattish opening this morning with Nifty, SENSEX both up above marginally so though. Nifty up 0.09%, just holding over the 22,500 mark at 22,517 this morning. Sensex up 0.01% at 74,114. Mid cap and small cap also in the green today. Mid cap up 0.13% at 48,826 mark. Small cap up 0.23% at just a quarter of a percent there at 15,111 mark. India VIX, the volatility index, is down by 0.35% at 40. Now this is as far as markets is concerned, opening on a flattish but positive note this morning. Let's quickly take a look at how various sectors are performing. And there you have it. It's a mixed bag today this morning as far as banking and financial stocks is concerned. It's mostly a sea of red here, apart from HDFC Bank and Kotak Mahindra Bank both being outliers. HDFC Bank up 1.35%, Kotak Mahindra Bank up 1.21%, Axis, SBI Life, ICICI all in the red this morning as far as ICICI Bank is concerned, is down about 0.75%. HDFC is also down 1%. So banking and financial stocks, they're a mixed bag as far as technology sector and services sector is concerned. It's a sea of red. And Infosys, of course, reacting sharply on the back of the Morgan Stanley downgrade from overweight to underweight and equal weight, I beg your pardon, is down about 3.5%, 3.62%. That is Infosys. TCS is also down 1.79%. HCL Tech is down 1.82%. Wipro also taking a beating, down almost 3%, down 2.9% this morning. So IT pack, they're reacting negatively on the back of that Morgan Stanley report, which speaks about how IT sector could continue to underperform in months to come. But let's take a look at other sectors as well, with energy and mineral sector mostly in positive. Consumer durable sector, Maruti and Titan among others are also in green this morning, and there you have it. That is as far as markets this morning is concerned. We'll continue to track all those details very, very closely here. Moving on to the US now, where a 95% majority of economists polled by news agency Reuters last week across Canada and the US as well as Mexico said that recession fears and risks in their respective economies have increased as a result of Donald Trump's chaotic tariff implementation. 70 of the 74 economists believe so. Well, you don't necessarily have to be an economist to be skeptical of Donald Trump's economics. Many believe he has done more harm to the US in the first 50 days than he did in his first full term in the Oval Office. His flip-flop on tariffs, resettling of the US foreign policy on war in Ukraine, adding volatility to cryptocurrencies prices via US strategic crypto reserve, and over-reliance on his aide Elon Musk on slashing government jobs all have led to confusion at best and chaos at worst. While many say that economics and markets are not necessarily correlated, the US stock markets wiped off a nearly $4 trillion since Trump took office, with last trillion evaporating in the wake of not denying recession fears in a media interview, which left the average US Joe worse off than before. Add to these woes is the fact that Donald Trump inherited a good economy and now leaves it to the gallows of high inflation via tariff, high unemployment via Doge, spooked stock markets, in fact, like never before in the light of uncertainty and higher interest rates for even longer. So, the big question is US economy staring at a recession, and if so, where does it leave the rest of the world? Let's talk about that. Joining me on the show is Banik Chitran Moitro, Managing Partner, Chrysalis Capital. Banik, thank you very much for taking time out. Does Donald Trump seem to know the impact of tariffs on economy, and where will it lead to his country? If at all the inflation does go up and recession fears continue to mount, we're looking at trillions of dollars being wiped out of markets.
Yeah, I think he's following a policy of what he would call planned chaos. But what happens in planned chaos is that a lot of other variables kick in. I think what has been surprising for the markets is the uncertainty and the flip-flops on the tariff policy, which have been changing every day. In fact, over the last 48 hours, there have been 2 or 3 shifts in the tariff policy versus Canada. At one level, the policy was postponed to April, then auto sector was exempted, and then suddenly yesterday the tariffs on steel and aluminum were doubled to 50%, which are going to take effect from today or tomorrow. So I think the major uncertainty is around the fact that people are not clear as to what the policy is. And most importantly, like in wars, the response of the counterparty is unpredictable. I think Canada in the first round actually brought down their tariffs when they announced postponement in February, but this round of postponements have not led to Canada reducing their tariffs. In fact, there has been a retaliation with the Premier of Ontario increasing electricity prices by 25% for 3 American states. So again, I think it's getting tough. I think there are fears of inflation spiking from under 3% to 4%. So as you mentioned, a lot of signs are portending to a likely recessionary outcome. But again, not all economic news is as negative as people make it out to be.
All right, but proving to be negative at least for now. I want to take a moment to talk about Donald Trump's flip-flop on tariffs. We knew tariffs are coming, and then we knew they have been deferred till March. And now we know further that they're going to be deferred. But as far as aluminium and steel tariff is concerned, it was 50%, now it's 25%, at least that is coming through. As far as the tariff, the conversation is concerned, it's leading to a lot of confusion. And how real is the impact now before it actually hits? Because markets seem to be pricing in what could come by the way of tariffs, and suddenly they're not really coming anymore. What are you making of this chaos?
So I think there are two undesirable effects of the chaos, right? One is the turmoil in the equity markets, which are very well documented. The other big turmoil is in consumer confidence in the US, right? If you look at the entire boards, right, which look at consumer confidence, I think February consumer confidence numbers are at their lowest since August 2021. If you look at the Conference Board, which is one of the leading publishers of US consumer confidence, there's a near 9-point drop since January. It's the largest drop in consumer sentiment since August 2021, and the consumer confidence index is around or a little below or 80, which is historically what happens when an economy is headed into recession. So these two unintended consequences are actually what's creating the entire hawkish approach of economists who believe that there are signs of recession. I think the only good news, despite everything we are hearing from Doge, is that unemployment still is at 4.1%. It's been between 4.1 and 4.2% for the last year. So we're not seeing major movements in the unemployment number. But again, the risks of recession today are far higher than they were 2 months back.
And the risks of recession are higher. So, if US stock markets were any indicator of what's really happening in the US, while you said that, unemployment is still under control, inflation is under control. At the same time, these fears are now exacerbated by the way of what is being seen as a very hawkish tariff stance. What is going to be the road ahead for the US economy? Because precedent was clear. He did not really, over the weekend, did not really shoo away or deny that there are possibilities of a recession looming large. What does it really mean for the US?
So I think you have to look at scenarios, right? In the scenario that the tariff war escalates, right, and countries retaliate, which is what Canada is doing, China has also done so. There's likelihood that Mexico will also retaliate. This actually covers nearly 45% of US trading basket. There is at least $2 trillion of goods which in the US will become 20-25% more expensive. So in that worst case scenario, you would see inflation go from under 3% to over 4%, right? Which is quite likely to push the economy into negative growth. In fact, one of the Federal Reserve models, the Federal Reserve of Atlanta model, there's a model called GDP Now, is actually projecting a 2.5% contraction in the US economy for Q1 2025. That's one outlier because the Federal Reserve of New York's model still projects a 3% expansion. But again, in the worst case, if the tariff war continues and there is retaliatory tariffs imposed by Canada, Mexico, and China, inflation will rise. You will see increase in unemployment, and there's likelihood of economic contraction, if not this quarter, but over the horizon. The other scenario is that deals are struck, which is also quite likely. It's hard to predict what will happen, but if you see new trade deals get struck in the next 1 or 2 quarters, you will see the tariff war cool down and the likelihood of recession coming down significantly. I think all of President Trump's advisors, including the Commerce Secretary and the economic advisors, have gone on television and publicly spoken about the fact that there is no threat of recession. There is going to be some temporary transition and pain, and they're scared to use the word recession. But again, a lot of the metrics and the reaction of the equity market suggest that we're headed towards some turbulent times. Interestingly, the spreads on the 10-year US Treasury yields have also come down by 11 basis points over the last week, which just suggests that the economic outlook for the short term remains unoptimistic or pessimistic. So there's turbulence ahead. Whether we head into recession, which is 2 quarters of economic contraction, is still hard to predict. Even the worst or the most pessimistic model, which is the JP Morgan model, now predicts a 31% chance of recession in the next few quarters. This is up from 11% a month back. But again, the odds are still not more than 50%, as you would expect if you're really headed to a recession.
All right, and before I let you go, what does it really mean for the rest of the world? As we saw on Monday, with Nasdaq snapping about 4% and US markets reacting very, very sharply to what is a tariff policy. Perhaps nobody has a clarity on whether it will happen, it won't happen. The rest of the Asian indices as well as the Indian markets reflected that sentiment. What does it mean for the world if US does slip into recession in the next quarters or so?
So if it's a tariff war-led recession, so US's largest trading partners will be adversely affected. I think US recession will be immediately followed by a recession in Canada. There'll be economic slowdown in Mexico and China as well as a result of these activities. The impact of minor trading partners like India will not be that high. India trades only around $100 to $150 billion of goods to the US. It's not a big number when you look at a $4 trillion economy. Maybe there are some impacts on export sectors like software, which are not under the purview of tariffs. So in general, if you look at it, the global economy grows at around 2.5% in years. The US economy grows at 3 to 4%. The US economy going into recession will have an impact on the overall global economy, slowing down growth. The impact will be major in major trading partners of the US, but for countries like India, there will be an impact, maybe 0.5 percentage point reduction in growth, but not as major as it will be on the US, China, Mexico, or any of major trading partners of the US. So it's something to watch out for.
So would it be fair to say that India is likely to remain insulated if it's a tariff-led recession?
Relatively insulated, provided we can manage our currency. I think one of the biggest risks India has is the currency depreciation, which has depreciated quite sharply over the past few quarters. If we can manage our currency depreciation and manage foreign exchange reserves, the downside risk of the US recession to us will not be that high. But again, we need careful economic management. We also need to manage our inflation. We also need to ensure that the domestic consumption story, which was the focus of this year's budget, continues humming, right? So again, I don't think a recession in the US will mean a recession in India, but we have to keep an eye out to ensure that we manage our macro parameters, particularly the fiscal deficit, carefully as we move ahead.
All right, Bani Chitran Moithro, thank you very much, sir, for taking time out for joining us on the show this morning. Let's now take a look at stories we're tracking worldwide. US President Donald Trump reverses course on doubling Canada's steel and aluminium tariffs, sparking market turmoil and trade instability. And fearing tariff-related price hike, US car buyers rush to dealerships as uncertainty over Trump's trade policies grow. US stocks continue to fall on Tuesday, with benchmark S&P 500 index falling more than 3.4% over the past two sessions, its largest drop since early August last year. And Donald Trump buys Tesla Model S from Elon Musk, calls it beautiful as he defends Musk's criticism and legal battles. US and Ukraine agree for a 30-day ceasefire proposal after talks in Saudi Arabia, awaiting Russia's response amid ongoing conflict. Nissan appoints Ivan Espinosa as the new CEO, tasking him with reviving the brand after years of scandals, leadership turmoil, and weak sales. Europe's top car maker Volkswagen warns of a tough year ahead as profit margins stagnate, competition rises, and global trade tensions loom. Delta Airlines slash profit forecast as economic worries hit travel demand, sending airline stocks tumbling. And shares of big three US airlines slump after disappointing forecast from Delta and American Airlines, sparking concerns about a travel demand slowdown in the economy. In a major development, US President Donald Trump pulled back on his pledge to double tariffs on Canada's steel and aluminium just hours after announcing the move. The sudden change in policy caused financial markets to drop sharply before recovering. The back and forth came after Ontario Premier Doug Ford threatened a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the US, a move that could have an impact on over 1 million American homes. But as Trump backed off, Ford also agreed to suspend the surcharge and meet with US officials later this week. The White House now says only the previously planned 25% tariff will take effect with no exception or exemption. Trump allies are calling it a win for the US, while investors remain on edge over the unpredictability of his trade policies.
As you know, there's a very strong man in Canada who said he was going to charge a surcharge or a tariff on electricity coming into our country. He has called and he said he's not going to do that. Okay, he's not going to do that. And it would have been a very bad thing if he did, and he's not going to do that, so I respect that. But we were just informed that he's not going to do that.
Will you make a different decision now about the tariffs on Canada? Will you reduce it?
At that, but probably so, yeah. He was a gentleman.
Will you reduce it back?
He was a gentleman. Look, I think our country had to do this. We had to go and do this. They've taken away, other countries have taken away our business. They've taken away our jobs. I did it initially very strongly against, as you know, China and some others in the first term. And it was a very successful term. We had no inflation. We had the greatest economy in the history of our country.
Tesla stock is
you're
also...
going to have drops and markets are going to go up and they're going to go down.
Yeah.
But you know what? We have to rebuild our country. Our country has been stripped of its jobs, of its factories. And I'm tired of seeing where they build apartments, cheap apartments in an old broken down factory. But you have factories all over the place that are empty from many decades ago. And we're going to change it around. And it's all taxing policy.
And Wall Street's losing streak continues, with US stock tumbling again on Tuesday. The S&P 500 has now dropped more than 3.4% over the past two sessions, its biggest decline since early August. Markets remain volatile as investors react to the conflicting updates on tariffs, adding to fears of a possible recession in the US. More details in this report.
U.S. stocks added to the biggest sell-off in months on Tuesday, with the Dow dropping more than 1%, the S&P 500 shedding 0.75%, and the Nasdaq losing about 0.2%. Trading was volatile following conflicting tariff updates that have sparked fears of a potential recession. Eric Lynch, managing director at Scharf Investments, attributes investors' uncertainty to the timing of President Trump's policies.
They probably should have started with the short-term gains, which would have been, in our opinion, an extension of the tax cuts in 2017, and also, some lighter regulatory touch. Instead, they've gone after the long-term structural goals first, which are kind of rebalancing U.S. trade and also trying to get more private dollars into the economy versus government spending. That is very difficult to do. It's going to take a long time, and so that lack of certainty in the market is really kind of paralyzing consumers and businesses.
The S&P 500, which briefly went into correction territory on Tuesday, is down nearly 3.5% over the past two sessions, its largest drop since early August. Among individual movers, Kohl's forecast a bigger-than-expected drop in annual comparable sales, sending the retailer's shares plummeting more than 24%. Dick's Sporting Goods dropped more than 5.5% after the retailer forecast downbeat annual results. Shares of American Airlines slumped more than 8%, and Delta stumbled over 7% after both carriers gave disappointing first-quarter forecasts. And Citigroup became the latest brokerage to revise its stance on U.S. stocks, downgrading its recommendation to neutral.
In a show of support, US President Donald Trump has now purchased a Tesla Model S from CEO Elon Musk. Musk lined up several Teslas in front of the White House on Tuesday for Trump to choose from. The president even got behind the wheel as Musk gave him a tour of the car's features. This comes as Musk's facing and mounting criticism, legal battles and backlashes over Tesla's recent struggles are far from over. With Tesla shares plunging on Monday, Trump accused Democrats of trying to illegally and collusively boycott Tesla to hurt Musk and his company. He praised the electric vehicle, calling it beautiful and all computer, but noted the car would be for his staff as he is not allowed to drive on public roads. Meanwhile, shares of automaker closed nearly 4% higher on Tuesday, rebounding from the biggest one-day fall in 4.5 years. Remember, activists have lately staged Tesla takedown protests to voice displeasure over Musk's role in sweeping cuts to federal workforce at the behest of Donald Trump and cancellation of contracts that fund humanitarian programs around the world.
Hello, President Trump. Are you looking to buy or lease today?
Well, I'm going to buy, and I'm going to buy because, number one, it's a great product, as good as it gets, and number two, because this man has devoted his energy and his life to doing this. I think he's been treated very unfairly by a very small group of people. And I just want people to know that you can't be penalized for being a patriot. And he's a great patriot. And he's also done an incredible job with Tesla. And I mean, nobody else has a car company started up in the last 30 years that's been successful. I don't think so. And not only successful, but super successful. And because he's able to find billions and billions and billions of dollars of fraud and waste and all of the things. I mean, our country is going to be very strong very soon because of a lot of the things that he's done and a lot of the things that I'm doing. And there's no better team, but there's no better for what we're doing. There's nobody like this, and he shouldn't be penalized. And when I watched the other day, I said, I can't believe it. It should be the opposite. People should be going wild, and they love the product, but because he's finding all sorts of terrible things that have taken place against our country, they want to penalize him in an economic sense. And I just think that's very unfair. So I just wanted to make a statement. I'm going to buy one. Now, here's the bad news. I'm not allowed to drive because I haven't driven a car in a long time, and I love to drive cars. But I'm going to have it at the White House, and I'm going to let my staff use it. I'm going to let people at the place use it. And they all are all excited about that. I'm not.
The United States and Ukraine have agreed on a 30-day ceasefire proposal reached after more than 8 hours of talks in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that the proposal would be presented to Russia and the ball is now in Moscow's court. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky described the proposal as a positive and stated that the ceasefire would take effect as soon as Russia agrees.
Ukraine on Tuesday agreed to accept a U.S. proposal for an immediate 30-day ceasefire in the conflict with Russia. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced the agreement after more than 8 hours of talks between Ukrainian and U.S. officials in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
Today we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation.
Rubio said he would now take the offer to Moscow.
And we hope that they'll say yes to peace. The ball's now in their court.
The development comes after a stunning Oval Office shouting match between the presidents of the two countries.
You're gambling with World War III.
The rift had immediate repercussions for Ukraine. President Donald Trump canceled military support and ended crucial intelligence sharing. But as part of accepting the proposed ceasefire, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz said Washington will resume sharing aid and intelligence with Kyiv.
And that's effective immediately.
Outside the White House, Trump said there would be a U.S. meeting with Russia to discuss the ceasefire plan soon.
Hopefully President Putin will agree to that also, and we can get this show on the road. I think it's a big difference between the last visit you saw at the Oval Office and this. So that's a total ceasefire. Ukraine has agreed to it, and hopefully Russia will agree to it. We're going to meet with them later on today and tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to wipe out a deal. If we can't, we just keep going on, and people are going to get killed, lots of people.
Is Zelensky invited back to the White House?
Sure, absolutely.
Later, Russia's foreign ministry said it didn't rule out contacts with U.S. representatives over the next several days, according to state news agency RIA. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was in Saudi Arabia but did not participate in the talks, said the ceasefire was a positive proposal.
Вважаємо це позитивним.
He also said the two countries would work to finalize a minerals agreement.
And that's all we have on the show. News and updates will continue on the other side. You are watching News 9.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9. English news as it
मैं और आप एक जैसे ही तो हैं। एक बार मंजिल दिख जाए
One shot of a century.
तो उसे पाने के लिए हम अपने कदमों को नहीं रोकते।
That looks out.
पर कभी-कभी मेहनत और मंजिल के बीच रह जाता है एक फासला।